Welcome to 10 Weeks, 10 Questions. This week's question is, what is wrong with the world? This is a question that so many people are asking, especially in the last year or so when so many people have been affected by the coronavirus. Why do so many bad things happen today? And this really is an admission that the world is broken. The Bible tells us in Romans chapter 8 and verse 20 that creation is subjected to futility unwillingly. In other words, it is under a curse against its will. And this takes us back to the very start of our Bible, in the book of Genesis, in the early chapters which describe for us how God created the world. And he looked at the world and he saw that it was very good, it was flawless. But we read how sin came into the world and marred what God had made. The Bible again tells us in Romans chapter 5 and verse 12 that sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin. And so death spread to all men because all sinned. Everyone, without exception, has been affected by this catastrophe. It is like a river that is contaminated at its source, and all life downstream is polluted because of it. And we see the effects of this all around us and in us. But sin has not only affected ourselves and our surroundings, it has damaged our relationship with God. Sin has put hostility between us and God. It has created a barrier between us and God. We learned last week that God is a holy God, which means that God hates sin. He is intolerant of sin. As we consider the question, what is wrong with the world, we tend to look at others, and we tend to look at our surroundings. People rarely would look at themselves. The Times newspaper once asked a question of its readers: what is wrong with the world today? The famous British author G.K. Chesterton wrote back these words: "In response to your question, what is wrong with the world today? I am, yours sincerely, G.K. Chesterton." G.K. Chesterton really hit the nail on the head in that short response. The Bible tells us that all have sinned and fall short of God's standards. Each of us individually have violated God's laws, and we stand guilty before him. And as we look at ourselves, we have to admit that that is the case for us. Our very nature is corrupted by sin, and it is displayed in us by our actions and by our attitudes. You may compare yourself to your neighbour and think that you are good enough. But when you compare yourself to God and his infinitely holy standards, we fall woefully short. We stand no chance before him. Ultimately, this is what is wrong with the world today. That doesn't mean that personal suffering, such as illness, is a direct consequence of personal sin. There is not necessarily that direct cause and effect relationship between sin and suffering on an individual level. But creation as a whole is subjected to suffering because of sin. Now, this is a very bleak picture to paint, but I want to assure you today that this is not the end of the story. Because just as sin and separation came into the world through one man, through Adam, so grace and salvation has come into the world through one man, Jesus Christ. And we will learn more about this in future weeks. Thank you for listening.